And a very good evening to you. I am Lisa Lord, and our focus this evening is on Coddington College, the historic Coddington College. And my very first special guest is the Executive Secretary to the Coddington Trust, Dr. Hensley Sobers. Dr. Sobers, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Welcome, Lisa. My pleasure to be here. And I would say, as I usually do, welcome to our oasis of history and heritage.
In a beautiful parish of St. John.
In the beautiful parish of St. John. That's where you're from, right?
Yes, indeed. Born and bred. Now, let's start by looking at the history of Coddington College, which is the leading theological college in the Caribbean and the actually is the oldest tertiary institution in the region. So let's look at its history.
That's right. It is important to know that the college and the surrounding estates resulted from the will of Christopher Coddington III, who I always say to persons is a Barbadian, or was a Barbadian. He was born in Barbados in 1668 and died in Barbados Good Friday in 1710. I believe that that is what drew him to, and his interest about leaving property in Barbados as well. Of course, most of his education was in the UK at Oxford University, Oxford College, and he is seen as an educator and probably a man before his time in terms of that thinking, that strategic thinking. His will, in his will, he left 2 plantations to be used as a higher education institution. The college, the buildings were supposed to be used as that, and the plantation was supposed to be used for the benefit of the persons who lived on the plantation, including, as he puts in his will, the 300 slaves that he had here. He requested in his will to have professors and scholars living on the plantation and leading, if you like, the educational and the learning of persons who are going to be here. And he set out 3 areas for that learning to take place: physics, surgery, and divinity. And that is what we retain over time, generally.
Now, we know he willed the estate for Coddington to be what it is today, but how did it actually come into being to be Coddington College?
Yes, he left the estate, the 2 plantations, as I said, for the administration of an organization in the UK called the United Society for the Propagation of Gospel. It has changed its name since then, or twice since then. Today it is known as the United Society in Partnership of the Gospel. And that institution or organization ran the plantation and the estate for 271 years. Because of his request in the will, they engaged Murphy fathers, persons who were involved in the business of theology, to take care of teaching persons in the order of ministry and the priesthood and so on. And that, all of that, of course, is driven from what he said in the will, that it was supposed to be a place for divinity as well. The college actually started in 1745. So we celebrated 275 years in 2020. Yeah. Unfortunately, we were not able to celebrate that as we wanted to because of the COVID. We were planning to do that celebration jointly with the Lord's School, because it is not well known that the Lord's School started here, and that is why the Lord's School celebrates its anniversary It's September the 9th, 1745 as well with us. The college started then as a grammar school because it did not have enough material to satisfy the higher education rubric. So it started off as a grammar school, did grammar school work, science, and those kinds of things. That is where Lodge School came from, as a grammar school, essentially. And some of the higher education that it did came from students who had passed the secondary or the grammar school level and who went on to do classics or advanced subjects in order to further their educational and professional development. In our main classroom, there is a plaque with a number of names of persons who have passed through the college. Some in the area of classics who went on to do medicine and so on. Some went on to be part of the priesthood. Some went on to government, administration of government in certain lands, including Fiji in one instance. So we attracted then students from Lodge, students from Harrison College, and of course those students who came directly to the college to further their studies.
Going back to something you mentioned, you said that Mr. Coddington in his will said that over 300 plus slaves should be allowed to continue living on the plantation.
That's right.
Because there's that element of slavery, has that ever been a controversy for Coddington College, given its history?
No, it has not been a controversy. I know that it is highlighted quite a bit in some of the historical dialogue,
yes,
and the literature as well. But one can understand that a person born in an environment where his parents were slave owners and responsible for the slaves and so on, one could expect that would be part of his influence, if you like. There is a story. I believe that different historians say different things, but there is the story that he was very he loved the slaves, if you like. He did not like slavery, if you will. So he was known to bring the slaves in from the fields in the midday, from the hot sun and so on, and engage them in reading, engage them in activities that would further their education, so that the Holy Cross Church on the hill, yes, here was a chapel. And that's where many of the slaves came off the plantation and gathered in order to go through, to read and learn their scripture and get involved in that.
I guess what I'm getting at is whether or not it has put a stain on the history of Coddington College.
No, I don't. I would not say that. I have not come across that as an issue. Okay. We have never been faced with petitions or any rebellious behavior because they were slaves. Like I said, the historians talk about it and their past there.
Okay. Now, there's the Coddington Trust, of which you are in charge of.
Right.
And this was established in 1983 by an Act of Parliament, and the trust serves as the governing body of the Coddington estate. Let's look at the work of the trust.
Yes.
And just to be clear, the estate of Coddington is about 700 acres. So we're
That's
not
right.
talking about 2 plots of land.
Yes, 700 acres, including the campus.
Yes.
The college campus, which is on about 22 acres. So the college campus is 22 acres, and all the other acreage centers around that, from Bath Beach to Fortescue on the east of the island. and then from Concept Bay to the Society Hill, if you like, and then the entire plantation of Society. So on the lower end, just over the escarpment, there would be about 400 odd, close to 500 acres, and then 200 and more acres of Society plantation. That is what we're talking about. We see the Act made provision for or secured the trusteeship of the will, so that there's no action that can be taken to sell off the lands so it is held in perpetuity. We are constrained to get rid of any of the land by selling. The area that is probably more has legal authority, if you like, to sell is through the Tenantry Freehold Purchase Act. So all of the descendants of the slaves who are living on the land or who live on the land for over a period of time and who qualify to be tenants and to be landowners through the Tenantry's Purchase Freehold Act, they are the only ones who would are entitled to benefit from once they choose that opportunity. I must say here, though, that I'm not happy that has been taken advantage of by many of the tenants. One of the thrusts...
It has been taken?
No, it has not been taken
up. It has not?
Has not been taken up the way how we would expect persons to do that. And part of the thrust of the trust, and certainly the Secretariat under my leadership, is to influence persons to take opportunity that is given by that particular act. I think we have seen an increase in interest in that regard. More and more persons are becoming interested in leaving something for their offspring. So that reality is more than anything that's driving the push to own a piece of the land through the Tenantry's Freehold Act.
And I understand the restrictions placed on the trust in terms of not selling off the land, but 700 acres outside of the 22 owned or used by Coddington College itself is a lot of land to just have sitting there. It is.
But we have to look at the intention. And the intention, of course, even when it was managed by the USPG, United Society for the Propagation of Gospel, or in partnership with the Gospel, the economic area of entry, the economic sector for Barbados then was driven by sugar. And all of these lands were pretty much in sugar cane. And so you could imagine that the land was intended to earn for the upkeep of the college. So the land is supposed to be used for the benefit of the college and its educational programs and its reach to people generally. The whole upliftment and development of people was part of the focus of Christopher Coddington III. So that's why the land should be used. The focus has been, or the approach that we have taken really, is to lease that land or some of that land. And from those leases, then we are able to provide support, financial support to the college. But agriculture and sugar and so on, as you know, there has been a downturn, serious downturn in that area of economic development. And we have suffered as a result of that. The number of persons who are interested in that area have also decreased. So we were left to do a strategic plan that would show how we could benefit, how we could move the college and further the development of the college and use the estate for the benefit of what it was established to do, and that is look after the souls of men and women while taking care of their bodies. And that is a quote, if you will, from Christopher Coddington's will.
Now let's look at the strategic plan, because
Yes.
you joined the trust in 2013, took over the trust in
That's right.
2013. So
That's
let's
right.
look at the strategic plan, which I understand is altered every year,
That's
depending
right.
on the needs.
That's right. And that's because I'm a strong believer that a strategic plan is not a dormant tool, if you will. It is very much dynamic, it's alive, and we formed or established a company called Coddington Estate Development Company Limited, and that is responsible for the development and management of those assets that have been passed on or vested in it or assigned to it for management and development, as the case may be. So the trust makes a decision and assign projects to the CEDCL, the Coddington Estate Development Company Limited, and they manage the projects or have oversight of the projects. The areas that we focus on in that strategic plan and that we are driving are tied to the economic development of the country. So we looked at land use policy. So we had a study done which looked at how can we utilize this land. Of course, we have to take into consideration that the land is in the heart, if you like, of the national park. The national park, which runs from Baycox, I thought, in St. Lucie, to East Point, and we are in the middle of that national park. So the use of the land must take into consideration that element as well. The focus, therefore, of the strategic plan is to look at harnessing, and this is how we describe it. We harness the gifts of God, which is the land, the water, the sun, and the wind, to fuel the development of the college. So the land has value, high value. How do we utilize the land to ensure that we optimize the value? The water through the spring runs through the college. So we have water that runs, that runs through the college all the time. We are not without water coming through this. And the spring is very much alive and going. As a matter of fact, we have to correct a number of persons who say that they feed the ducks in the pond, to advise them that really you're talking about a lake and not a pond, because the water is flowing all the time. A pond tends to be dead water or stagnant water, if you like, whereas this water is refreshed all the time through what is coming from the springs, as the case may be. So we are looking at how could we utilize the water on the land and get economic value from the water. How could we utilize the land and how could we utilize the sun? So today, when we look at solar, we are attracting a number of persons interested in the solar renewable energy. Of course, that is twinned, mixed with agriculture, because based on the policy, we do not want to take the land, or we are not able to take the land out of agriculture totally in order to do that. So there's a mix of economic development that's happening, particularly on the society plantation, which is considered in Barbados to be one of the more productive plantations on the island. We have looked as well at tourism.
Right.
And we have seen tourism in several facets. There could be faith-based tourism. There are a number of church communities around the world that attend conferences and those kinds of things. We want to attract those persons here. So we've set out on a plan to do that. Of course, that was stymied by the
Pandemic.
by the pandemic. But we are getting back on track where that is concerned. And there is also the heritage aspect, architectural heritage, the natural heritage that we have here, and persons using this facility as a place for refuge and reflection and meditation and those kinds of things. So we have on the cards the development of a labyrinth to attract persons who want to be in that moment of peace and reflecting on self and their spirituality and those kinds. That's the character of the place generally that we want to retain. So you can move away from the hustle and bustle of Bridgetown or the wider community and come to the college and enjoy the serenity and peacefulness of the area generally. We have looked at the agriculture in the context of from horticulture and fisheries. So you use the water to develop fish, pot fish down there, the tilapia. We use the land for horticulture. I argue that we have more than 50 Anglican churches who use flowers every Sunday, and therefore I don't see that there could be enough persons involved in the growing of flowers and the fauna and so on associated with that will not leave some space, some room for us to provide that. And the funds from that, the revenues generating from that, used for the benefit of the college generally. And the college not only as a theological institution, but as a learning institution, because recently the college engaged in becoming a technical vocational educational training center, so that it can get involved in the technical training and vocational training of an education of our young people. So take areas like music, the playing of the organ. Take areas like the furniture building, the building of coffins. My understanding is that we have to import quite a bit of that. So why not develop persons who can be trained and become professional in that area. The area of embalming. I understand we have to send persons to Jamaica and overseas as well to learn embalming, and we know the value. There are a number of funeral directors that can benefit from persons who are trained in these areas. So areas like that, and the area of horticulture as well, could be seen as one that persons take on. So those are areas that the strategic plan speaks to. We had planned and was very advanced in our planning with regard to a tour that took in the lands of the college. From St. John's Church, we were incorporating St. John's Church, which has a lot of history associated with it, and St. Margaret's Church. So the tour is going to begin here, go to St. John and St. Mark, travel along Society, so that we take in the plantation house and that plantation, east to the Coddington School, which is on the property of the trust. So it's part of the estate, the Coddington High School. They go to Holy Cross, so that you see the development of the cross there. Society Primary School, which up to 2015 was used by the Ministry of Education, but because of the diminution of students, those students were transferred to St. John's Church. We have managed to lease that property to a medical school, Queen's University College of Medicine, and they have refurbished that school and are pretty much getting ready to commence their operation early 2023. So so we will take that, the tour will take in that area as well. We will go to St. Mark, which is part of the property of the estate as well, take in that beautiful Atlantic view from St. Mark and all that goes with it, and return to the college for lunch, where the kitchen, the restaurant, which we have also leased, because when I joined, we ran the restaurant, but we learned that it was not beneficial to run a restaurant with a diminution of students, 7 students, and the cost for running the restaurant. So we leased the restaurant as well, and the restaurant is up for lease occasionally, so that we can benefit. The students are still fed through the purpose of the restaurant.
So the Trust has done a lot and has a lot more plans.
That's right.
So Dr. Sobers, thank you so much for sitting and chatting with us this evening. I really appreciate it.
Yes, my pleasure.
That was Dr. Hainsley Sobers, the Executive Secretary to the Coddington Trust. But there's still a lot more to discuss about Coddington College. We haven't even touched the surface. After the break, we look at the academic side. Stay with us.
Trees save lives. The Ministry of Environment and National Beautification invites all Barbadians to compete in the National Tree Planting Competition, which starts on November 7th and runs until November 21st. The successful entrant planting the most trees will win a prize of $15,000. Second prize, $5,000. Third prize, $3,000. Register on theplanting.org for further details. Let's beautify Barbados, and remember, trees save lives.
Welcome back as we continue our look at the Coddington College. We're joined now by the principal of Coddington College, the Reverend Dr. Michael Clarke. Reverend, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for being here with us.
It's my pleasure. Now, earlier in the first half of the program, we looked at the history of Coddington College. We also looked at the work of the Trust. Now, you deal with the academic side of things. Let's look at Coddington College as a seminary where priests are trained.
Okay, so the main purpose of the institution really has been for the training of priests. As a matter of fact, its initial idea was that we would train missionary priests, persons who were supposed to be both priests and doctors, to go over to Africa and do some missionary work. That was the original intention back in the 1700s. But over time, that has shifted, and the focus has primarily been about training clergy for the province, especially as we began to raise up our own indigenous clergy. There was a need for local training. You would recognize that prior to this, you would have had clergy coming in from the mother country, as it were, and providing the ministry here. But as more and more persons became interested in ministry, we found that there was a cadre, a local cadre of clergy, and by local I mean across the region as well too, of persons who were desirous of serving God within this context. And so a lot of the focus then shifted from going over to Africa and basically to supplying the region, as it were, with clergy who were from the culture, from the community, and who understood the plight of individuals and the journey of individuals, and would be more supportive in ministering to such persons.
And just for the sake of our viewers and listeners, you train Anglican priests.
We train Anglican priests for the most part, right? However, the college is open through the University of the West Indies, so there very well at times have been persons who have come in to do ministry, to train for ministry in their own denominations, not necessarily sent by denomination, but individuals who felt that they wanted to have a better understanding of scripture and the word, etc. So they would have on their own volition come to Coddington College, taken the various exams, etc., being awarded a degree, and then be able to present to their denomination, well, I've done these studies at Coddington College. Now, what the denomination would do with them with respect to that, well, we would not know. Some of them might be sent on to other schools specifically for the denomination as such. But we have trained persons who are in ministry in other denominations, not only Anglicanism.
Okay. Well, you offer several programs, diploma, undergraduate, and graduate. Tell me about the programs you offer.
Okay, so the various programs that we offer is specifically intended to satisfy the requirements of the University of the West Indies. We are, in fact, in many ways, the Department of Theology in the Faculty of Humanities and Education of the University of the West Indies. So with that blessing from them, being able to offer this on their behalf and being accredited through them, we were able to begin, for example, with our diploma program, which is a college-based program. It's not connected to university, but the intention behind the diploma program is to say to persons, well, here, come, get a sense of what theology is about. No real examinations, no real tests, etc., but just to give you a feel of this area of studies that we call theology, this particular discipline. When an individual is able to have that experience, then they may be inclined to say, well, okay, let me explore doing an undergraduate program. And that's where the University of West Indies kicks in. And they enter into that program, and then where they end up from there on is dependent on them. Some persons have gone all the way through to the PhD. Others have just gone to master's or just taken the first undergraduate degree and feel comfortable that this is what they need. So there's a range, as it were.
And it's important that you mention the connection with the University of West Indies Cave Hill campus, because when you leave here, you're leaving with a solid accredited qualification.
Yes, it's a Bachelor of Arts, brackets theology.
Now, the college also acts as a research and development center for the region as it relates to religious activity. And when I think of religious activity, I think about persons attending church and more persons going into the priesthood. So let's start with the priesthood. Are we seeing more persons coming into the priesthood or less persons than, let's say, 20 years ago?
We are seeing far less persons entering the priesthood as it relates to 20 years ago, 30 years ago. There's been a significant decline. And this is worldwide. It is nothing that's unique to the region or to Barbados or our colleges. There are many colleges that have closed in recent times. There are many colleges that have sort of come together. You see, there's a history to all of this, and I think I always say to persons, we always need to look at our context in order to have an understanding of what's going on. For a very long time, we have existed in what one can call Christendom. And by Christendom follows the same pattern of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire decided to adopt Christianity as its mainstay religion. It was its mainstay religion because Christianity had this desire to be a worldwide religion. So when the Romans were deciding to conquer the world, they adopted a religion, Christian religion, and they took this religion with them wherever they went. When the Roman Empire began to decline and the British Empire began to ascend, by then the Christian community was still a part of that. So you had this kingdom as well as this Christendom operating at the same time. Over the last couple of years, I mean, it's the last couple of years, 50 years or so, we began to see that the Western world was beginning to agitate and asking questions with respect to, you know, is there anything else outside of Christianity? Is there any other way of being connected to the divine? You had an experience where the Eastern religions began to come across the Atlantic and be able to show a person in the West other methodologies of engaging the divine. And so there was a growing sense of awareness as to, well, this God that we're speaking of doesn't seem to be only restricted to one particular line or path. There seems to be different paths that might very well lead to the same divine experience. And so that began to witness the decline of what we're calling Christendom. So as Christendom declined, Christianity kind of oftentimes speak about secularism, but it's not so much secularism. It can also be seen as a kind of a liberation in thought, where persons are able to have the freedom to think differently, to think from a different perspective, and not have one's thought processes dominated or dictated by a Eurocentric model of who God is or what God is. You would know how within that whole colonial machinery, the Native Americans would have been virtually destroyed in many ways, and they're now even just trying to have conversations with them after they've done such a horrible job on them, the Iraqs, the Caribs, the whole 9 yards in that regard. So we're in a world that is finally beginning to explore what it means to be a self before God without necessarily carrying the baggage, and realizing that if I choose a particular baggage, I've chosen that baggage, and that baggage hasn't been chosen for me. And this has become very important. So as this has been occurring, the sense of priesthood, for example, being a very attractive way of being in the world, and persons, because Christianity was so high on the totem pole, therefore any person associated with it from a position of authority, by extension, that individual was also important. And you can just look through all the centuries of the various popes and bishops and all the paraphernalia that went along with that, and the wealth of the church, tremendous wealth of the church. We wouldn't speak of how much of it was obtained, but it's the wealth of the church. So we have coming out of that, and persons are beginning to explore what it means to be a self in the world. And so that whole position of church, for example, has kind of dropped as Christendom began to disintegrate, which was a wonderful opportunity for the Christian church, because for the first time in history, it was being given the chance to be what it really is, and that is a religious movement, as opposed to a part of a colonial machinery, a part of a tool of an empire. It was now being placed where it really belongs. So for example, in 1969, when the government of Barbados disestablished the Anglican Church, okay, it was a gift, right? Many persons were upset because the church no longer had that power anymore, but it was a gift. What it was a gift for? It was a gift that says you are a church. You are here to care for the souls of individuals. With that disestablishment, there was no longer a requirement for a person to be baptized before they could go into a church, into school. You could enter a school without that if you so choose. What that did was that it returned baptism out of the state's machinery and placed it fully and squarely into a religious context where it belongs. So when then we use baptism, we're not using baptism as a convenience for some state requirement. But when we use baptism, we use baptism because we are bringing an individual into a faith community and offering that individual a path towards their own spiritual maturity and development.
I guess the follow-on question then, since less priests are going into the priesthood, do you find that priests are as respected as they were years ago?
Well, there's a yes and no to that, because the the thing about respect now is that too has shifted.
Yes.
Right? Because respect is given where respect is due. There may be a context where respect is given because there's a fear that if one doesn't respect, that there may be repercussions. But then there is another dimension that says, I give you respect because of the part you are playing in my life, in my journey, the part you're playing in helping me to understand myself or helping me to heal myself or to grow, etc., etc. So I couldn't use a blanket statement and say we lost respect. I say that thing of, quack, 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 because the priest walking by, yeah, that's gone.
Yes,
right?
definitely.
Right, but hey, Father is here and Father has been with me or has done this, or Mother has been here and she's assisted me in this regard, and therefore there's admiration, there's respect, etc. So it's shifted, right, again, as well.
So in terms of still on the topic of religious activity, persons attending church, now we know for sure, even before COVID, that had dropped off as well significantly.
Yeah. And like I said, it's part of that whole Christendom dismantling, whereby when you take away the requirement from the whole idea of this is the requirement for you to be a citizen, when we take away that, then we're left with the individual making a choice to be a part of a faith community. Now, the danger that we might have fallen into was a sense of entitlement, complacency, right? And if you use those kind of terms, then you begin to realize that it was the expectation that churches will be full. We don't have to do much. Churches will be filled because we are the established church or we're the main church. But as a culture, as a community shifted, not necessarily in a bad way, but as it shifted, then the question was, will the church respond, right? There's a saying that we often use that says that the Church of God has a mission in the world, right? But in recent times, we've had to change that to say that the God of mission has a church in the world. And the shift there is intended to help us to realize that there's a purpose for the church in the world. It is supposed to be in the world. It is supposed to be in the midst of the world. It's supposed to be engaging the world and nurturing the world and healing the world and assisting the world. It is not standing over and above the world. It is in the world. So the fact that there has been a sort of a falling off has to do with where the church stood. And as the church seeks to find a new place for itself, it will have to go through these kind of experiences of low numbers, etc., until it rediscovers its place in the world, as it were.
And as you admitted, the church was complacent to some degree in
Yes.
terms of always expecting that there would be that level of congregation
Yes.
there.
It's like, and I hope I can mention Kodak. It's like Kodak figured that there will always be film, right? And when the digital age came in,
Yeah.
they didn't worry about it because there will always be film. So it's that kind of complacency where we don't realize that this world has changed. This world has changed so drastically, and you identify COVID, but like you said, this change was
Years
going
before.
on years before COVID. All COVID did was COVID just said, hey, this is what it looks like. And all the excuses that we were given, all the reasons that this is happening or that wasn't happening, and all the ways we're trying to patch the thing up, it says none of that works. This is the reality. And there's nothing with having to look at the reality. It's more helpful because if you can deal with the reality of where you are and what you're dealing with, then you can find a solution, you can find a way forward. But if you're pretending that this is not occurring, then you will keep trying all sorts of band-aids and wasting time that could be devoted to say, okay, what's the real situation? And how do we respond to the real situation?
Well, COVID-19 did present a real threat to Coddington College. Let's look at the impact of COVID-19 on the institution.
Well, COVID-19 impacted our institution in a massive way because our numbers went down significantly. And because our numbers went down, it meant that the sense of community was jeopardized, because you have to have a certain number in a body of persons gathered to really be in community. And what persons don't realize, that the reason many of us focus on residential training is because there's a dynamic that occurs when people live together over a period of time, which you can't duplicate. You can't duplicate by taking a correspondence course or by going and coming to a class. Going and coming to a class, you get the information. Living in the community, you get to wrestle with all the nuances and how you show up and where your buttons are, and how do you deal with situations when your buttons are pushed, and how do you remain in community when you want to just get on a flight and just get out of here. But how do you stay in that community and find a way how to be in this community, how to thrive within the context of this community. So residential training is very important. But when you're down to 5 and 6, then persons can disappear to their rooms and then you don't see them. So there's no engagement, there's no not necessarily confrontation, but there's no interaction to the degree that creates those kind of learning moments for you. So that was a tough time for us.
Well, the pandemic also created an opportunity for the college to open its doors to the victims of Hurricane Elsa. You had several families who lived here for just over a year. Mm-hmm.
Yes, the pandemic had a good side for Coddington College as well. But yes, there was that one with respect to those who had lost their homes or their homes were damaged. And it was a joy being able to engage persons over the time, especially as because no one likes to be away from home and living in a single room, an entire family living in a single room for an extended period of time. And our task was to make those persons feel as comfortable and as possible. And we came to a point in time where we had to move forward, because we were asked to do it for 4 months and we ended up doing it for 15. But we had to move forward, and you could see the discomfort between even my staff, but especially those residents who were now being asked to go somewhere else. And we felt a way too, because we were hoping that when we had to say goodbye to them, that they'd be going back to their homes. But many of the homes weren't touched as yet, many of them weren't ready, and so they had to go into another situation like this. So that was heartrending for us. But it was a wonderful opportunity for the place to be full and for us to have a community, as it were. And at the time, we had about 5 or 6 students. So in a sense, the students got a chance to sort of intermingle with ordinary folks who weren't necessarily here doing theology or studies, etc., but were just persons with challenges who wanted people to speak with. And for them, they adored the students. Yeah. They were fully enamored by the students. Every so often I would hear that there's some activity being organized by the residents for the students, as their way of saying thanks for whatever it is that they were doing with the students. So it was a beautiful time to be here when they were here with us, and we trust that their sojourn away from home will be shortened.
Now, going back to the academic side of the college, I was pleased to understand, because for years I honestly thought it was just seminaries that came here. But I know that you can come if you want to get in touch with a deeper understanding of the word. As you said, you do a Bachelor of Theology. I recently found out somebody was doing a Bachelor of Theology and they have no interest in going into the priesthood. Mm-hmm. So it is a place to come and get in touch with yourself, more or less.
Yeah. I think more and more persons are having that interest, but I think also persons aren't aware that you don't have to be thinking of priesthood in order to explore this. And more, I think what's also happening is that there's a growing interest in spirituality among ordinary folks, and that whole new movement, the spiritual but not religious,
yes,
is a very important movement. And the college is able to facilitate those kind of exploration of ideas, of thoughts, etc. We are in the process of working at how can we put various programs together, because you see, one of the things that we have to deal with is that even theology itself has shifted significantly. In the very, very early days, theology was basically understood as someone who had gone somewhere, had an experience of the divine, more than likely a mystic. They sat and they recounted their experience of the divine, and they'd written letters to others or whatever. And those bits and pieces of information became the body for theological reflection. But they were grounded in the experience of persons. What happened over time is that persons kept reflecting on these experiences, but not necessarily having their own experience.
Right.
Okay? So then theology became a very heavily theoretical academic exercise, devoid of the experiential. What the new movement of an interest in spirituality has done is that is rediscovering the whole experiential component. So it's saying that I don't only have to read about St. Teresa of Avila or St. John of the Cross, but I have to realize that I have an experience of the divine as well. That I, by engaging in my own journey, can explore my spirituality, and I can even write about that. I too can have my mystical experiences, and I can explore mysticism. So the experiential dimension is coming back to us, and I love your expression. It's so puzzling.
No, it's puzzle from the perspective that, do you think that Barbados, or I should say priests, and by extension Barbadians, are in a position to accept this whole concept of spirituality versus being religious? Because for years we've either identified as Anglican, Catholic, Adventist, Jehovah's Witness. You can't just say that, oh, I'm spiritual. Are we ready for that conversation?
Well, you may not be, because you may be dated.
No. I'm ready. I'm open.
But the reality is that we're in a world where our young people don't need labels.
Yeah.
Our young people trust their experience more than the label. They're not necessarily willing to take your word for something.
Yeah.
All right, and this is why sometimes we get in trouble with them, because they want to have their own experience.
And they're going to question you.
Of course they have to, because whatever they do now, they're seeking to do it from a deeper place than where we did it.
Yeah.
We would have done it from a place that says that someone else said, this is what you should do. This is what you should believe. This is what you should accept. And the youngsters are asking why.
Well, let me ask you this. If there was one thing you wanted Barbadians to know about Coddington College, what would it be?
Well, I want persons to understand that Coddington College represents a lot more than it has in the past. Coddington College represents a place where we want persons to engage and explore their spirituality. We want persons, and this is something that Barbadians have been doing to some extent in their own way. There are persons who just come up here and sit by the lake and just enjoy just the stillness, right? That's the beginning of something that's greater, because it is not just enjoying the stillness, but it is, let's explore it together. Let's explore your understanding of God. Let's explore what God is saying to you. The individuals who are having experiences of the divine, that they don't necessarily have any place to go and talk about it,
Yeah.
and they're not saying anything to their friends because people may think that they're a
Yes.
little bit loony.
Yeah.
Right? And we are saying, no, there's a lot going on in our world, and we need to embrace it. And we want our college to be there, so that it can provide that avenue where persons can come and be with the divine, come and talk about their experience of God and explore that. It's not just doctrine, right? It's not just a doctrinal space. It's a spiritual space.
Well, I thank you for inviting us into your space here at Coddington College, Reverend. Thank you so much.
The pleasure has been mine. Please come again soon.
Thank you. I hope we'll be back soon.
Okay, great.
That was the principal of Coddington College, Reverend Dr. Michael Clarke. I'm Lisa Lord. We're watching One on One. Do have yourself a wonderful evening.